Well, everyone, we get to finally talk about the second generation PSP, aka the PSP 2000, aka the PSP Slim, aka the PSP Lite, and see how this console holds up in 2023. Now, fortunately for me, I was able to buy all of these PSP consoles, but not until like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, which is kind of sad because I didn't really grow up with PSPs. I mostly grew up with my Game Boy Advance and my Nintendo DS Lite, but I had, a family member who did have a PSP at that time, and I will tell you, I was always so jealous of the PSP. And they actually owned the PSP 1000, not even the 2000, which was I would say a better console overall than the original 1000. But this console I think was super cool, and I love that Sony kept the same kind of design for all their consoles. When you look at the Nintendo DS, the original one, to the DS Lite to the DSi, there were massive changes, and I actually probably like that a little bit more. But with the PSP 1000 to the 2000 to the 3000, I think Sony just knocked it out of the park with the first one, that all they had to do was just to keep refining it, maybe change a few things here and there. But there's still a lot of people who look at the PSP 1000 as like the ultimate PSP, where I would say almost every single person looks at the original Nintendo DS and just isn't really that big of a fan of that, and they usually skip it just to go for the Nintendo DS Lite. Now, with the PSP 2000, I still think this console is still worth buying, which is pretty crazy to hear, but because of the gaming library available for the PSP 2000, as well as how cheap these things have gotten, it's kind of insane when you consider everything going on in the marketplace right now. The PSP 2000, if you're able to pick it up for a fairly cheap price, it may be worth buying. I don't know if these things are going to skyrocket in price at some point, but they're only going to be getting more expensive from here. For example, I'm looking on eBay right now. A lot of these things are going for around $40 in various conditions, all the way up to $80 to $90. So these things have actually kept their price kind of high, which is pretty interesting. If you look at a PSP Go though, this is the insane thing. PSP Go's are going up in value like crazy. I'm not too sure what it is with PSP Go's. I bought mine I think 3 or 4 years ago for $100. These things are now selling for $150. I'm seeing one for $160, $190 for this one, $190 again. These are insane. So imagine 3 to 4 years doubling your money on a console, or getting a 40 to 90% X on your money. It's crazy. Now with the PSP 2000, this thing is, I would say, the biggest asset going for this console would be that it's 33% lighter and 19% slimmer than the original model. Now, from what I remember, a lot of people were happy about it because the PSP 1000 was very, thick. It was a fatter console. However, I think people used to call it the PSP Fat as well. It's something like that. However, with the PSP 2000, the big issue that we had with this console was that they did actually have to go ahead and slim the battery down on this console. Apparently, from PlayStation.fandom.com, they're stating that the PSP 2000 was halved in the battery sense. So this thing was half the battery size than it was before. So they also state that the handheld was then made to use the power more efficiently. But that is kind of the biggest problem here. And that is basically the problem that when you're getting a console like this, is that you want to get a more powerful console in every single way from a successor. I feel the same way about phones and tablets, PCs, PlayStations, MacBooks. You want everything to be better if you're spending more money on it. That's the whole sense. I hate it when we get a new phone and then the phone ends up having a smaller size battery than the older one. It makes no sense. It still doesn't make any sense to me. So hopefully things like that can improve in the future. They also state that the PSP 2000 went from 32 megabytes of RAM all the way up to 64 megabytes of RAM. So that was also a pretty good thing as well, I would say, going for this specific console. And I would also state that with the successor of a console, you don't want it to go ahead and completely redo everything that the original console did. So when they have something like a PSP 2000, it's nice that they kept it in its familiar design and everything like that. One thing I've always liked about kind of the PlayStation and the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 series was that the PlayStation 4, you could still look at a PlayStation 4 Slim or PlayStation 4 Pro and see that it's like a PlayStation. Same thing with an Xbox One. You can look kind of like an Xbox One, 1S and 1X, and be like, okay, that's like an Xbox. But when you look at the Xbox 360 and the 360S and the 360E, they look like completely different consoles. Same exact thing for the PlayStation 3, Slim and then Super Slim. They look like completely different consoles, which maybe some people like, but personally for me, I like when a console follows the same design language, because then when we get to the next iteration of the console, aka the Series X or the PlayStation 5, you can tell that that's a major difference. You can tell that, oh, you have a PlayStation 5. And that's what I kind of feel like Sony did right with the PSPs. I will also say with Nintendo though, sometimes they have to do it. If the first design did not work out that well, like with the original Nintendo DS, well, they're going to have to change it with the DS Lite and then eventually refine it with the DSi. But the PSP 2000 went on to be a pretty decent console for the most part. I think the biggest takeaway from this thing maybe wasn't the RAM increase, but mostly the size decrease. I think that's what most people probably remember with this console. I will say though, the PSP 3000 ended up coming out a little bit after this one, and then we ended up getting the PSP Go, the PS Street, the PS Vita, lots of different things that ended up coming out from Sony not too long after this one. But I still think the PSP 2000 is still worth buying. I still think it's still fairly relevant for the most part. I don't know if it'd be like the first console I'd recommend people to buy today, considering you can emulate 99.99% of everything a PSP can do now, but take it as you will. I still like this console, and I think it's still okay for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More important than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.